Hello, and it's Notcast 204. Today is the 25th of May, 2022. I think it's Notcast 204, I think. Maybe 205, who knows? I'm losing count. And today I'm going to be talking about a very pivotal album in my history. The astute of you will have read both the title and the t-shirt which I'm wearing in talking about the Manic Street Preachers 1996 album, Everything Must Go. This is an important album, and it's one that I listened to an awful lot when it came out, which was a staggering 26 years ago. Now, yesterday, being the 24th of May, was the 25th anniversary of the band headlining the Manchester 9X Arena, which became their first sell-through VHS concert film, Everything Live, which is included on the 20th anniversary box set version of Everything Must Go, which is here. But I'm also posting up this calendar as well because the band became quite successful and they did some quite unusual things with the release of the album. Now, the start for the album, and people kind of forget this, is that it was the first album that was released by the trio of the Manics in May 1996 on the back of their number 2 hit single, A Design for Life, that sold 92,000 copies in its first week. And although it's regarded as an album that was the first album that was made by the trio, half of the album, 6 songs, were written and were in various states of birth before their fourth member, Richie Edwards, the band's rhythm guitarist and general minister of propaganda, went missing on the 31st of January 1995. So one of the questions that there is around that is, and certainly no one's ever managed to solve the mystery of his disappearance apart from himself, is, well, what happened? And what happened to him and where did he go and all that type of thing. Nobody really knows. And there's lots and lots of theories that go around. There was lots of letters and discussion between people that were Manics fans, kind of positing that maybe he'd gone off to India, or maybe he'd just gone off and gone to live with a girl and disappeared off the face of the earth and all that type of stuff. I genuinely don't know. Nobody knows. I mean, to all intents and purposes, he was classified legally dead 7 years after he went missing. So in 2002, that was the option that could have happened, and I think at some point that was taken up. So his royalties and income from being a member of the band is directed to his surviving family members. But there really is. I have no idea what happened, and in fact, in many ways, for certainly also the most obvious and high profile disappearance that has happened, but it's also a great unsolved mystery and one that people are still talking about to this day. I don't know, and to some extent, it's not relevant anymore. As Sean said when somebody said, "Well, what would Richie make of you as a 3-piece band?" And Sean said, "It doesn't really matter because he's not in the band anymore." And that's probably the best way to describe it. Is Richie abdicated his position in the band, and the band changed dramatically with the release of this album and the subsequent years. So the fiercely literate, very angry, introspective, almost furious sound of the Holy Bible was one that the band didn't go back to for a very long period of time. And one could say, well, that's because Rich's input wasn't in the group, although he was present for the writing and he contributed to half of the songs that are on the album. The other part of it is the band changed not because Richie left, but because of the events of the change. So when you go through a major loss, the loss of a childhood friend, for example, who's died before his time or has gone missing, that changes you. It changes your perspective upon the world that you live in, and makes you realign your priorities. In much the same way, by the way, as the COVID pandemic, which is still lingering on in some parts of the world. It's not gone away, it's just changed. The COVID pandemic gave people an opportunity to rethink and re-examine parts of their life and maybe make some changes. So, for example, the world has changed post-COVID. The post-COVID world is very, very different from the pre-COVID world in many, many ways, despite what the various Conservative MPs who have big land portfolios and incomes as rental landlords will tell you. The world is not the same. And when you go through a catastrophic event, you change. There in psychology, I've mentioned this before. There's a theory called the EPAS, which is the enduring personality change after catastrophic event, which is that you experience something, it's traumatic and outside it, and you come out the other side of that, you're a different person. You're not the same person. You can't be the same person anymore. The person that you were has disappeared. There is a new person there. And the band had gone through a catastrophic event with the disappearance of their friend and come out the other side of it a different, changed band, which was in no way was able to continue some of the parts which it had had previously. Sorry, I'm trying to hold in a yawn there. It's been a very, very, very long week. I haven't had any time off work for 4 months, and I'm very close to having a week off, and so I'm really quite tired. And hopefully that doesn't show, but it just did. Little bits of me squeak out to the sides. This is the 20th anniversary box set edition of Everything Must Go, which I will get to in more detail later on as we discuss the album. But the first thing that we do is talk about the band's first release as a trio, which is perhaps not where you might expect it to be. So when Richie went missing, I think there was some debate around would the band continue. They'd played shows before without Richie, Reading Festival, I think Tea in the Park in 1994 when Richie was in hospital, so maybe a couple of other shows, but they hadn't played, they hadn't officially become a three-piece band, and Richie was stroke is irreplaceable, although the band now have a live guitarist that he doesn't stand in the same place and he doesn't occupy a position in the democracy of the band as a working unit. The Manics, and this was like very, very clear, but in the cover art to the album Everything Must Go, the Manics were a trio, 3 people and 3 people only. A 3-legged table, effectively, without the fourth one there. This is the Japanese CD of Everything Must Go. And if you think about the cover art, by the way, that we've got for this, and also the first single that was released from the album, Design for Life, very, very similar, in fact, to the art that we had both for New Order's Movement and New Order's Ceremony single. A kind of a gold embossed cover that kind of sets forward almost a non-image, and although the cover for Movement is ever so slightly different, that shade of blue, the dark blues that are there that sit inside the text, that's a part of the design that we have for the Movement album by New Order. It's a deliberate typographical and design choice to call back to a previous event. So even at this point, there was literacy and knowledge and thought that was going on. And so the band started recording as a 3-piece, and their first release was a track on this charity album called Help, that was released, I think, in October or November 1995. Help, a charity album for the War Child charity, in which artists all recorded on one day, and the album was released on CD and cassette 5 or 6 days later, when the cover art didn't have a track listing on it, because the bands didn't necessarily know what track they were going to do. In order to get the track listing for the album, you either had to put the album in and play it, and then listen to it and understand what the track listing was. You had to buy a newspaper, or you had to, as I did, cut out the track listing from a copy of a Music Monthly a month later, which told you what was on it. And the Manics track on this is a cover version of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, recorded with Mike Hedges, and I think with might be the first recorded appearance by Sean on trumpet as well as on drums. So this is a photocopy of the sleeve that was on there. Track 13, Manic Street Preachers, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head was played by the band on many shows of the 1994 Holy Bible Tour. They played it in the acoustic interregnum, what a lovely word that is, at Wolverhampton Civic Hall on the 8th of October 1994, and didn't get a studio release. Hang on. Sorry, I realised my throat was very dry and I needed a drink. Of course, if I'd been very cynical, I would have used my Manics Everything Must Go mug, which I bought in 1996 at the Aston Villa Leisure Centre, now demolished in Birmingham. But I didn't. I'm not that cynical. So the band announced their first live show as a three-piece, and it was an appearance at London's Wembley Arena on the 31st of December, I think, or maybe the 29th of December. Yeah, 29th of December 1995, London Wembley Arena, supporting the Stone Roses on the last show of the Stone Roses' Second Coming tour. I had tickets to go. My girlfriend and I had a discussion, and I decided to spend the time with her, which now I still think maybe I should have gone to the Manics, but that was 27 years ago. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I certainly don't. They played a 10-song show, 10-song set at Wembley Arena, which premiered 5 new songs, and it peppered the new songs in between the old ones. So they opened with Elvis Impersonator, You Love Us, From Despair to Where. Then they debuted A Design for Life and Enola Alone. Then Roses in the Hospital debuted Australia, Everything Must Go. Then Motown Junk and Motorcycle Emptiness. No idea what it was like. I wasn't there. However, I was at their first UK headline show of the period, which was at Leeds Sound City on the 9th of April 1996, which is also on this bootleg CD, and that features about 10 or 11 songs played at the Town and Country Club, which, if I remember rightly, is a converted church halfway up a hill in Leeds city centre. That show was also released on this bootleg CD, and both of these feature the truncated BBC version of the performance, which cuts off the end of Motorcycle Emptiness. The full version of Motorcycle Emptiness and the encores of This Is Yesterday and Motown Junk were broadcast on the radio in Europe, but not in the UK. And we went with James and my brother Graham to that show, and our car broke down on the way there. It broke down on the way back. I got in at 9 o'clock in the morning, and well, that was quite an experience. I certainly wouldn't ever recommend having your car break down in the middle of the side road near Leeds in the middle of the night in April 1996. It was shit, as James and Graham will tell you, but we made it. We made it home in one piece, and I didn't go to Leeds for a gig again for another 22 years. So I think I learnt my lesson. The first release from the album, which was released on 2 CDs and a cassette. I do have the cassette singles, but I don't know where they are at the moment in my filing system, was A Design for Life. And A Design for Life, and it's really difficult to see the covers, but let's bring those up. Coming in embossed sleeves. Here's a CD1, which is backed with 3 extra studio tracks. CD2 of a 2 CD set, which is backed with remixes. There was a cassette single that was backed with a live version of Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And many, many, many years later, it finally got a 12-inch release here for Record Store Day, backed with the tracks Mr. Carbohydrate and Dead Trees and Traffic Islands, and the Stealth Sonic Orchestra remix of A Design for Life. But as you can see, in a very shiny, embossed, lovely sleeve. I think this was the 2016 20th anniversary 12-inch release. A Design for Life, first single, took the approach, the one that James Dean Bradfield said is his idea of what makes a song great is that your postman can whistle it as he delivers the post. And my God, A Design for Life was a stylistic triumph. It reset completely the band's commercial outlook for the rest of their career. One could argue it's become a millstone around their necks, because I think every show I've seen them at since then, they've played it. The one show that I know they haven't played it, I didn't get to because they were playing the HMV, of all places, the HMV in Oxford Street in London, to 150 people. And even though I was in the queue to pick up the tickets, as soon as the store opened, I wasn't successful. I was not happy about that. And 20 years later, I'm still holding grudges against HMV, which has now closed. And so, therefore, victory is mine. But no, A Design for Life is an absolutely classic Manics track. The only reason that I am perhaps very cynical about A Design for Life is that I've heard it at every goddamn Manics gig I've been to, and I've been to about 50 since the release of the single. And it always comes at the end of the set, aside from when they play the album in full. And I really wish that the band would change the setup a little bit, because it would just make things a little bit more exciting. It's kind of like if you see a certain band and you know they're always going to play the same 4 songs at the end, and it becomes, I mean, obviously there's an element of going, well, I never thought I'd get to see live bands again after COVID. And there's an element of thinking, well, it's amazing. I'm in the same room as a band that has changed my life whilst they're playing the songs that have changed my life, that have made me see the world in a different way. The thing is that if you see a band a lot, and yes, I've seen lots of bands lots of times, it does get a little bit predictable. And I don't want to get too churlish about that. I'm very, very lucky to see the bands that I do, but then also I've made a decision to move down to London in order to be able to see the bands that I love more often. A Design for Life is a song that has set a template, actually. You can hear it in songs like The Verve Drugs Don't Work, other bands that have built in orchestras and built orchestras into their sound to try and build in a degree of gravitas and importance, which actually the song doesn't deserve. The 2 songs produced by Mike Hedges, which have the orchestra on, which I think are absolutely integral and do deserve the strength and gravitas and the sweep that an orchestra provides, are of course Yes by McCormick and Butler and Design for Life by the Manics. Other bands then saw adding an orchestra into the song as a way of making a song great when the song itself wasn't actually that great. It's not that far away now from probably someone like Shed 7 saying they're going to do an orchestral recording of She Left Me on a Friday to try and give that miserable peanut of a song some degree of gravitas and strength. And I'm going to talk about A Design for Life as a song when we get to the album. But the first thing it did was it became the Manic's first absolutely huge hit. Got to number 2 in the charts. The band had started off, although they had signed a publishing deal and been given an advance of, I think, £1 million for that publishing deal on the strength of the songs that they'd written for Everything Must Go. They were still perceived as not a great big band until A Design for Life came in, ushered in the coattails of things like Blur and Pulp and Suede and Oasis. They then became one of the bands that by virtue of being adjacent to that were regarded as a Britpop band, even when they weren't. There was very little about the Manics that was Britpop. The Manics were literate and clever, and they were angry, and they were working class, and they were ambitious, and they were unafraid to put quotes on their sleeves. I mean, if you think about the Design for Life single, the CD single, you open it up there, and it's got a quote on from Gaudi, the famous architect that's responsible for some of the most unusual and weird buildings in Barcelona, that you look at and you go, wow, how did a person ever think that you could occupy a space in such a fashion? And on the second CD single, I'm hoping there isn't a quote from Gaudi, there is a quote from about architecture there. And we had a huge bus stop size poster for this, so there was, the label knew that this song was going to be huge, and my God, it was. Some bands are one-hit wonders. The Manics are very, very lucky to have been something like 40 hit wonders, and to have been able to continually and consistently write amazing songs all the way through their career, although the albums have, I think, been a process of diminishing returns. Now, being the sad record collector that I am, in parts of Europe, A Design for Life was released after the album came out in a jewel case. Here it is as a double A-side with Everything Must Go, a remix of Everything Must Go, and 2 extra B-sides, one called Hanging On and one called No One Knows What It's Like to Be Me, that later saw an appearance in the UK on the B-side of the Everything Must Go single, which leads us to the band's 4th studio album, Everything Must Go. This isn't the cover, by the way, to Everything Must Go. This is a page which I took out of a magazine advert released on the 20th of May 1996, so 26 years old this week, if not 26 years old today. And I preferred that to the actual cover of the album. The actual cover of the album, by the way, is here. It is a photograph of the 3 members of the band staring in various directions. I do not like this picture. I always think that when bands put pictures of themselves on the cover of an album, that it's very, very dangerous. And unless you're able to set yourselves as almost being like Gilbert and George, as subjects inside a wider photograph, much like Pet Shop Boys covers, it's very risky putting a photograph of yourself on, because really, what have you got? You've got bored millionaires. Maybe not millionaires for the Manics. When you think about bands like Depeche Mode and U2 and stuff, it's photographs of bored millionaires standing in a studio and then picked out. So we've got pictures of various, body parts and things like that that reflects, a sample lyric from each one of the songs on the album. So the first song on the album is Elvis Impersonator, and hang on a second, you can tell I haven't practiced this, can't you? Elvis Impersonator is, in my opinion, it's a very strong song. It's a great opening track. Lyrics written by Richie Edwards, and it's called Elvis Impersonator, Blackpool Pier. And I think that it's a fabulous conceit around an Elvis impersonator, because Elvis never played the UK. In fact, Elvis only spent about 6 hours or maybe 4 hours in the UK at Liverpool Airport, because his plane, which flew him to Germany when he was in the US Army in the early 60s, stopped off in Liverpool, and he said, "Nice place you've got here, I should come back," and never did. Rumours have it that Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, had something to do with that terrible state of affairs, on the grounds that if he left the US, Colonel Tom Parker wasn't sure he'd ever come back. But Elvis Impersonator there is, I think, a strong, bitchy lyric about an overweight and out-of-date Elvis impersonator playing Blackpool Pier. Blackpool being a deprived part of the north. It's a British seaside town, and it's not. Sorry if you're in Blackpool. Sorry, I am going to say a rude thing about your town here. It does appear on Channel 5 documentaries about urban landlords for a reason. The reason being is that Blackpool is deprived. A lot of seaside and coastal towns have money issues and are generally deprived and regarded as some of the poorest areas, because the economy only flows one way. If you're in the centre of the country, if you're in London, if you're in Manchester, what you'll find is the economy is 360 degrees around you. If you're in a seaside town, the economy is 180 degrees around you, because the other side of that is sea. And, there's no towns, villages or whatever in the sea. There's just sea, water, fish, those type of things. And so local economies do struggle, and Blackpool Pier is regarded as almost like a riff on George Orwell's The Road to Wigan Pier. Not that Wigan's got a pier, by the way, but the lyric about being overweight and out of date kind of made me think that maybe Richie was talking about his own experiences as perhaps being not as young as he once was, not as fit as he once was, not perhaps as sexy as he would be, overweight and out of date indeed. And then track 2 is Designed for Life, opening with the line, "Libraries gave us power," which takes a cue from a sign outside Newport Library in Wales, which says, "Knowledge gives us power." And then the second line of A Design for Life is, "And then work came and made us free," which actually echoes one of the graphics that's in the booklet for the Holy Bible album, Arbeit macht frei, I believe it is in German, which says, "Work sets you free," which was a sign that was outside the Auschwitz concentration camp. That's the subject of the songs, I think, Intense Humming of Evil and Mausoleum on the Holy Bible album. So I think of Design for Life is also actually a very kind of sly aside about the view of the working class by the upper class and the ruling class, which is, we only want to get drunk, and we are told that this is the end, that there's no future, and that that they're given just enough education to perform. Sorry, that's quite a Stereophonics album there. It's a really biting song about the way in which, if you're working class in the UK, you're regarded as basically someone that can be fed bread and circuses, alcohol, and then all you do is you get drunk, you fight a bit, you argue amongst yourselves. If you're fighting amongst yourselves, you're not able to look at the systematic structure in which that if you fight amongst yourselves, you don't actually target who the real enemy is. Now that sounds very class war. Don't fight amongst your own. But I think there's some truth in that as well about the lyric, which is very much around how the working class are demonized. In the 80s, it was the gays because of AIDS. These days, it's transphobia. And, in the, 100 years ago, it was black people. And, there's always got to be somebody that needs to be picked on. 10 years ago, 2016 maybe, the chosen demon, the recipient of the moral panic was the immigrant and the European, because it was somebody coming over here taking our jobs, the jobs that we don't want to do. And it's a powerful lyric which addresses the nature of class war, information, and pleasure. That lyric about we only want to get drunk, about saying that's all you're really fit for, is that you have a little bit of drink, you forget what the problem is, you feel better, and then you go to work in the morning and you then chasing the weekend. And she left me on Friday and ruined my weekend. It's a wonderful, wonderful song. I love A Design for Life. I just wish it wasn't such a big hit single, and that's not me being a snobbish. I've heard it an awful lot. If you hear anything 400 times, you become numb to it, in the same way that great as Star Wars is, by the time I've watched it for the 375th time, I think I'm on about 340, you end up thinking, I'm not really feeling this the way that I used to feel it. Track 3 on the album is Kevin Carter, one of the Richie lyrics, which was the third single from the album, which means I have to bring out the fabulous CD singles for you. Which I, of course, will talk about in more detail outside of this. Kevin Carter is a really strange, brilliant song. It's about a war photographer, or a photojournalist in South Africa, who took a photograph of a child who was suffering from malnutrition and starvation, and his prone body, as he was fighting for his life, exhausted and desperate for food, was being watched by a vulture. It's a haunting, terrible photo. You watch that photo, you see that photo, you can't not see that photo. That's there forever. It's stuck in your mind, in the same way as the guy that blew his brains out, or the guy that set himself on fire on the front of the Rage Against the Machine album. It's one of those photos that, once seen, it can never be unseen. Almost like, I don't know, if you watch The Room, the film, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. There is you before, there is you after. And that photograph by Kevin Carter is haunting. And the lyric is around how the fame which followed and hounded Kevin Carter once he took that photograph, and how he eventually killed himself. He committed suicide. And he was trapped by the image which had been created around him. And I think if you wanted to be very deep about it, you could say that actually the lyric is Richie is writing about, he himself may have also regarded himself as painting himself into a corner in that lyric, going, actually, I'm starting to be trapped by my own image. There's some very, very dark lyrics, and there's a use of a word starting with K, which is effectively the South African equivalent of the N word. It's really tough. And the way in which the language is very clipped, very precise, very exact in its meanings. It's a fantastic work of poetry set to a bizarrely spiky funk rock track that sounds like something that the Red Hot Chili Peppers could only ever dream of being as good as. Also, Kevin Carter does feature a trumpet solo by Sean. There aren't enough songs with trumpet solos by Sean, so there you have it. Track 4 is Enola Alone, a song that the band played and still do play very, very, very frequently indeed. Enola Alone follows the lyrical conceit that we also have for other tracks, such as Revol, for example, which is where actually the word is forward and backwards. So Revol is obviously lover when it's reversed. Enola and Alone are mirror images of themselves. The idea of two sides of a whole, and one is the mirror and the reverse, which is both a perversion and a reflection at the same time. Enola Alone is inspired by a photograph from Nicky's wedding. In the photograph is both Richie Edwards, who disappeared in 1995, and I think the band's manager, one of the Hall brothers, who died of cancer. And so he's talking about that lyric there is around the fact that people have disappeared and were in his life and aren't. And so the lyric here, for example, says I'll take a picture of you to remember how good you looked. Like memory, it has disappeared, naked and lonely, within my fears. The idea being there that, there was a picture of that gorgeous day when your friends were with you and you thought, oh, I'm going to live forever and everything's going to be fine. And then one by one, your friends disappear as you get older and you start to disappear and things just become different. This is an album. Everything Must Go is an album that I listen to dozens, hundreds of times, and frequently in cars traveling to and from Manic's gigs or other gigs, all over the UK with my friend Andy, who died 2 months ago. And I can't listen to the songs off this album without thinking about him and those hundreds of hours that we spent talking rubbish about bands that we loved in a car traveling through a motorway in the middle of the night. I know that I'm now the only person that remembers those moments, and like memory, it has disappeared. I'm the only person that remembers those days, and there were dozens of them, and I'm really lucky to have had those days. But at the same point, I really miss the dude. I didn't see him very often, but no doubt if he was alive, he'd be watching this, and he'll message me in a bit and say, "Oh, you got that bit wrong. That quote's by somebody else." I'll be like, "That's why I love you, man." Yeah, so Enola Alone, yeah, that's a song that reminds me of my friend who obviously is no longer here. And then we have the title track, Everything Must Go. Everything Must Go, indeed. And Everything Must Go is again a song that sounds like a James Bond theme. It's got this huge string section, these very precise, very punctuated drum parts. And it's a kind of it's a lyric that's bizarre, actually. The lyric to Everything Must Go as a track. It's ambiguous, but it's not ambiguous at the same time. It's almost like it's a message to the fans of the band to go, look, everything has changed. Some things absolutely must go. We can't stay the same. We're not the same. Everything must go, like a closing out sale, a goodbye to what there was previously. And it's a great song. Side one ends with Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky. A truly bizarre title, a use of language. None of those words on their own feel wrong or weird. But then when you put all of those words together and you go, small black flowers, okay, there's very few black flowers, and then that grow in the sky, and it's like, what on earth is that? It's a lyric about the strangest subject, I think, to have got onto an album that was very, very popular in 1996. It was around how zoos cause mental health crises in the minds of the animals that live there. In much the same way as when you watch the end of 2001 A Space Odyssey, you suddenly realise when you're watching the end of 2001 that David Bowman is in a zoo and the aliens are observing him, and they've recreated what they think a human house would look like, but doesn't. The environment that an animal lives in a zoo is a recreation, but it's not accurate. There's no way that a polar bear would live in a place like that. Zoos are basically prisons, and that's around a song around the mental health effects that would have on it. Side two, The Girl Who Wanted to Be God, the song that gave the online name to a friend of mine way back in the 90s, takes its quote from a Sylvia Plath title. Takes its title from a Sylvia Plath quote, is what I'm supposed to say, actually. And it's unusual. It's got an ambiguous structure. The meanings aren't necessarily clear, but it's a very, very strong song. It would have been the fifth single from the album. In my mind, I mean, I always thought it worked very, very well live. Nightclub DJs used to play it, playing album tracks, which is pretty exciting, really. And it reminds me very much of a song called Miss Europa Disco Dancer by the band, which is from the Know Your Enemy album. It's got this kind of almost kind of chic Nile Rodgers kind of funk approach to it, which, given if you'd heard Holy Bible or Gold Against the Soul, no way are they going to sound like Chic. But you could imagine Nile Rodgers playing that song. It's funky in a way which perhaps is very, very underrated in the Manic's canon. Side two of the album, which starts here, is it follows the law of diminishing returns. The first half of the album, very, very top loaded, chock full of singles, 3 singles on side one. Then we have a track called Removables, one of the songs that's written, the lyrics are written by Richie, and it's a lyric that if there's any song on the album that's a B-side, it is Removables. I think it exists on the album alongside maybe Interiors as a song that maybe some of the B-sides should have replaced it. But it's a lyric that has a line about a moth dying easily, which of course people think is I bronze my thighs easily. But the lyrics don't scan. It's filler. It's mediocre. There's no uplift at the chorus. It's the very definition of an album track, and I really wish that I think the album would have been better as a 10-song album without this or Interiors on it. But we would have to change the structure of the album to make it work. And then we have our track 9, which is my least favourite Manic single of all time. Actually, no, that's not true. My second from bottom Manic single of all time, which means yes, I prefer Found That Soul to this, and the worst Manic single is one we haven't yet got to. It is Australia. Here are the promo CDs and the CD singles. I mean, musically, Australia is interesting. It's strong. It's powerful. It's dynamic. It's climactic. But the lyric is empty. It's circular. It's anodyne. It's plain, and the lyric really lets down the rest of the song because it is a very straightforward, very blunt lyric with no poetry in it and with little in the way of effectiveness in it. The lyric is, and I'll quote this here: I don't know if I'm tired and I don't know if I'm ill. My cheeks are turning yellow. I think I'll take another pill. I want to fly and run till it hurts, sleep for a while and speak no words in Australia. God, it's like somebody in Australia wrote a song called Wales, and it's just about I just want to be somewhere. It's lacking the insight and the vitality that a great Manic song has. Almost all the other Manic songs up to this point on the albums, even the ones that aren't amazing, you listen to and you go, they really have to say something. This song is a song that absolutely had to be written, that was crying, screaming off the page, going, listen to me, I've got something to say. And Australia says something without having something to say. It is my second least favourite Manic single of all time. And it's followed by Interiors for a song for William de Koning, who was a painter, and that song is about. It's not an amazing song. Again, it could come off the album, and I don't think anybody would miss it. Um, Interiors is a song about William de Koning, who had Alzheimer's, and he'd realised he'd started to forget. So imagine your mind is unravelling. You feel like you're missing pieces of sleep. And his mind is starting to forget the things that he's painting. So you're looking at artwork and you're going, I've never seen it before, even though it's a thing that you've made. Sometimes I have moments where I go through my old songs and I kind of see words and things, and I have no memory of ever writing that. But that's completely different. I'm quite prolific. I've written about 4,000 songs. How many of them are good? I don't know. You'll never hear them. But William de Koning could not remember works of art that he slaved over for days. And yeah, that's really interesting about how your mind unravels and the nature of memory, which of course ties in with the themes that are in Earlier Alone. Two more songs on the album: Further Away, which was released as a single in Japan, which breaks the Manic's first kind of manifesto point of no love songs, no adverts, no encores. It's a song about written by Nicky about missing his wife while he was on tour. And then the final song on the album, No Surface, All Feeling, which was the last song which Richie had a contributing part to. I think you can hear him playing guitar in the song as well. No Surface, All Feeling is accessible, it's direct. It works quite well live, but it's very predictable. And I think I'm numb to these songs, having seen them played live over the past 26 years, literally 50 times in some cases. It's a good song. It works well, but it's starting to become meaningless through repetition to me. I think Everything Must Go is a fabulous album. I mean, it's certainly one of their best ones, although I've been quite disparaging about side 2 of the record there and some of the songs that are on it, but it is a much, much better album than I feared we would get. It's got some very powerful songs on it, some of the best Manic songs on there. It's got some of the not best Manic songs on there, but it's a very, very good record. And it was a huge success. It sold in enormous amounts. So when we saw them at the Town and Country in Leeds, starting off, and the band were playing to maybe 1,500 people, and that was about the size of venues that they were playing on the Holy Bible tour. And then by the time they got to the end of that, they were headlining arenas. I saw them at the Aston Villa Leisure Centre, which is 5,000 people. I saw them at the Royal Albert Hall on the 12th of April 1997. Here's the bootleg VHS of it. I don't know why I've got it, but I've still got it, of the Albert Hall show. Inspired by, you see, Nicky said he wanted to play in the ruins of burnt out palaces, and I thought, well, actually, the Royal Albert Hall is probably the closest venue to a palace that you're going to get, so I wanted to see them there, and it was a vital and vibrant night. It was a great show. I saw them 4 times, and I bought a lot of t-shirts. You'll see a lot more Manics t-shirts as I talk through other Manics albums. Second single from the album, Everything Must Go, backed with some B-sides, so Stealthsonic Orchestra remixes and Chemical Brother mixes, tracks called Black Garden, Hanging On, and No One Knows What It's Like to Be Me. And here is the radio promo that comes in a shocking orange colour. This is the American tour shirt. The European version was in orange. I didn't need orange and grey, but I had them both. And on the Japanese version of the album, here it is, 14 tracks, was the first place where the songs No One Knows What It's Like to Be Me and Black Garden were included in the album. So, of course, I had to buy it. So this is a Japanese edition of Everything Must Go, which is exactly the same, apart from those 2 extra songs. It was the only place you could get those extra songs for a few months until the single came out. The third single, as previously mentioned, is Kevin Carter. And Kevin Carter had 2 B-sides. 3 actually. It had Sepia, which made a reference to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which, by the way, is the film that the song Raindrops Keep Falling From My Head, or Falling On My Head comes from, and also another B-side called First Republic, and an instrumental called Horses Under Starlight. And the 4th and final single from the album, and this was, I think, maybe a single too far, was Australia. Australia is backed with a remix of Australia and a remix of Motorcycle Emptiness, and cover versions of Velocity Girl by Primal Scream, Take the Skinheads Bowling by Camper Van Beethoven, and Can't Take My Eyes Off You, that old classic, songs that the band played in their early days when they were doing cover versions and hadn't written enough songs. Not amazing songs. The band toured, then they released a concert DVD, Everything Live, and in 2006 they did a 10th anniversary of it. They also did a couple of compilation appearances. This is later, Live at Leeds, featuring, I think, You Love Us, recorded at the show, which James Carr broke down in Hi James, Shake Dog Shake. And this is later, Brit Beat, which features a version of Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky, recorded for later with Jules Holland. Boom, 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 do boogie woogie woo piano. Why play one note when 4,172 can do? I hate Jules Holland. Sorry, Jules. Shut up. Play less piano. This is the 10th anniversary edition of Everything Must Go, and this features 2 extra discs. One features the B-sides, but also demos of No Surface or Feeling, Further Away, Small Black Flowers That Grow in the Sky, No One Knows What It's Like to Be Me, as well as acoustic demos of Australia, No Surface or Feeling, Interiors, The Girl Who Wanted to Be God, and rehearsal versions of A Design for Life and Kevin Carter, as well as try-out test productions of Australia and The Girl Who Wanted to Be God with Stephen Hague, who also produced New Order, Pet Shop Boys, lots of bands in the 80s. The version of Girl Who Wanted to Be God on here has a different bridge and different lyrics, by the way. But this version also has a DVD. It has a DVD, comes with a documentary. It comes with later TV appearances, TFI TV appearances, and 3 tracks live from the 9X. And it comes on 3 CDs. Again, it's very nice. Pictures of people that are quite well off, not quite sure why. various booklets and things like that. This is well worth getting. If you have to, if you're a Manics completist, you have to get this version because there's exclusive audio on the second CD and exclusive video on the DVD. The documentary isn't repeated anywhere else. And then in 2016, for the 20th anniversary of the album, the band released a super mega deluxe version of Everything Must Go. Here is the CD edition that features the live at 9X soundtrack to the DVD. And here is the super mega fancy pants box version, which I'll race very, very quickly through. This features the sleeve art. This is Everything Must Get, Everything Live insert. Here's a carrier bag that they sold at the merch on the tour. Here's some photographs taken by my friend Donna at the lead show. Donna was down the front, we were in the balcony. Here's some merchandise leaflets from the period. Albums you can also buy by the Manic Street Preachers. Generation Terrorist, by the way, sold 110,000 copies on the back of Everything Must Go because people needed and wanted to hear new Manic stuff. Here's a flyer or two for the UK tour, featuring a show at the I think the Wolverhampton Civic on the 25th of May. I was due to see The Cure, so I had tickets to The Cure. I was in Cardiff to see The Cure, and The Cure cancelled. Here's merchandise, t-shirts that I really wish I bought, but I didn't have the money. Here's a signed photograph. Here's a press pack from the period, and this is one of the early versions of the box set, which features the signed booklet signed by the 3 members of the band. And also, let's very quickly just go through their essays, text, pictures of CD singles and other things that aren't particularly vastly interesting. On this we have the B-sides, we have the album, we have the B-sides, we have the Everything Live on DVD, and we have a documentary DVD with a different documentary on it to the one that you've seen previously. This version also came with a LP of the album, which somewhat annoyingly had a photograph of the LP on the front, which is there. This is a flat which was given to record stores to stick in the windows to remind people that the Manics had an album called Everything Must Go coming out. And that really wraps up my whistle-stop tour through the Manics Everything Must Go album and periods. The only thing I haven't shown you yet is the Manics 1998 calendar. Yes, they were in the business of doing calendars, and 12 pictures, one every month. I'm very glad that I didn't write this photograph, by the way, taken at the Aston Villa Leisure Centre, one of the shows I was at. I'm not sure if I'm in that crowd. I've never spent long enough looking at it. I probably should have done.